As I was listening to Lester describe his experience, there were a couple things that struck me. One, he mentioned that he began thinking again, which I found interesting relative to some of the things we were talking about earlier, about the idea that we have to really let go of our thoughts. And I coupled that with his emphasis on clarity of intention and having the felt need for answers. And perhaps we can talk a little bit about that, that somehow we do need to get in touch with what our intention is, what our objectives are, what our purpose is, or who we are, what we're doing here, in order to move to that step of letting go, as you were talking about, David, earlier, that we have to let go of those mental programs that we create during the course of our life, and perhaps have been created even before we came here as human beings. What about that clarity of intention? Where does that come from? How do we create that clarity of intention and purpose so that we can move to the place you've been talking about and describing?
The thoughts that he was speaking about was when he was going through the process and arriving at the method. He would try one method and see that it ended up as a dead end, and then back up and say, no, that's not it. The method itself, as far as clarity of intention, every feeling has an intention to it, and that intention becomes rather obvious. In fact, as you let go of the intention, the feeling disappears, and with it all the thoughts that were flowing from that feeling. I would guess describing the mind as silent is probably rather threatening to people at first, the idea of walking around without a whole harangue of thoughts going through your head. So perhaps I shouldn't mention it without some explanation, but the thoughts are, all thoughts are disturbing. There isn't a such thing as a thought that's not disturbing to one's total peace. And it's only because you don't know a better state that you love your thoughts. And as they begin disappearing, and you begin to experience your beingness purely and totally, thoughts bring you down, and thoughts are no longer as welcome. You see, because pleasure is sort of a space between two pains in the ordinary person's experience. So pleasurable thought gives him that brief moment of respite from the pain. And really what he's trying to do is escape the painful thoughts which are lurking right under the surface. So he can think of a happy thought. It makes him feel good for the moment. Because right below the surface, most people are living lives of quiet desperation. Everybody on this planet is here because of ego. Ego is pain. So everybody is a hair's breadth from pain every instant. There's nobody walking the street who is not vulnerable to pain in one instant, and he knows it. When you get into a state where you're no longer vulnerable to pain, you're in a different state of existence. Then by comparison, you look back and you say, wow, how did I ever survive it? How did I ever survive being torn apart by those millions and trillions of thoughts all these years? And you see how the ulcer and the migraine and all these other things arose.
As I hear you talk about as I hear you talk about the ego, David, I'm reminded of the attitude towards the ego that comes out of many of the Eastern philosophies, and that is that somehow the ego is something that we have to move beyond, or we have to put aside. And I'm wondering if that's really the total answer. I mean, if we're going to function in the world, somehow we do have to have some kind of an identity or a recognition that we are functioning in the world. But what about that balance? Thought?
I think the balance has to do, as we mentioned earlier before the break, the intention comes from each person. Each one of us has a specific purpose for being here, in addition to a general purpose for the planet's being here and our being on it or with it. As the Course begins, people look at what they are here for. What do they want to take the Course for? And frequently the first things that come up, as certainly it's been the case with most of us, are what we want to do in the world. It might be making money. It might be having a satisfactory relationship with a wife or husband or children or parents or grandparents. It might be wanting to make one's mark. It might be wanting to be important. It might be wanting to have power, to gain control, to be loved, to be approved of. And all of those are goals that can be achieved by people using the method as they learn it on course. As they do so, however, as they begin to release the feelings of wanting to be liked by other people, of wanting to gain mastery over others, of wanting to be in a position of power over others, frequently, as they release, those feelings kind of melt away, and they feel instead that their intention changes to one of wanting to be kinder to other people, wanting to be more loving, wanting to be cooperative and helpful, instead of having it their own way. Now, we say you can have your own way, and the easiest way to have it is to let other people have their own way too, not to force other people to do it your way or get them to help you do it, but to achieve a state in which you feel harmless towards other people. Your behavior together is one of mutuality, so that both people want to do what is being done. The intention comes from the strongness of the unpleasant feelings. If people are uncomfortable enough, they're willing to take a straight shot for it, and for them it's very easy for them to learn the method and to use it successfully. They go very quickly. After you've tried everything else, if you've spent your life discoing and your feet are tired, then you're perfectly willing to find something more comfortable, more rewarding. So it's kind of for people who've tried all sorts of other things. This is a way that is not striving. It's the letting go of the striving, letting go of the grasping. And that, for that reason, it's easy.
David, in listening to you talk, my experience of you is that you've been through a lot of different experiences in your life, and just I'm wondering how those people who were once your peers, and still are your peers in the sense of the medical profession, how they've related to where you are now, and kind of leaving again, going back to that, leaving the pinnacle and going to Sedona, Arizona. Have you found that you can come back into that circle of peers and have the same recognition that you once had? Or
well, I understand them, of course, and I understand what it is they're doing. And I feel that what we started on that level has been well launched, has its own momentum, and is able to carry itself. And then I went on to other things. For instance, of course, I've worked with biochemistry and its relationship to mental illness, to brain function, to psychosis, to various neurotic states. So I myself also had hypoglycemia rather severely, and we did a lot of work in that area. Then I found by a shift of consciousness, for instance, I also had gout. So I had gout, I had severe hypoglycemia, I had numerous dietary restrictions because of the ulcer, the diverticulitis, the migraine, all these things at once. I found with a shift of consciousness that my whole body chemistry changed. I no longer had gout, I no longer had hypoglycemia, I know my cholesterol no longer was up, and just realizing my own perfection, the body immediately obeyed that realization, and my body chemistry instantly changed. So I discovered that consciousness is more powerful than anything else, and that how can we help people get better through consciousness techniques. So I became interested in these techniques because they seem to be more powerful, because the biochemical, nutritional, psychotherapy, psychoanalytic approach is only able to help a limited number. There are still people who cannot be helped. There has to be something more powerful. Also, as I became more conscious, I saw that many people had no intention of getting better, that there were karmic influences, that there was a higher level of consciousness, that there was actually a decision to be sick, and there was a failure to realize that one is the author of one's own sickness. And I saw beyond blaming it on environment and how you were raised and your nutrition and biochemistry and viruses and all this stuff in the world. I saw that it's one's own consciousness that determines these things. So I became more and more involved in consciousness and studying the mind. Curiously enough, psychiatry knows absolutely nothing or very little about the mind. Isn't that odd? Psychiatry knows nothing about the mind. Here we're talking today about a method called releasing, which psychiatry hasn't even heard of. The most powerful, effective, and rapid tool I've seen for overcoming emotional difficulty. And the profession hasn't even heard of it. So I found that throughout the ages, mankind has known, enormously powerful things, and how could we reach these realizations? Well, when you read the spiritual and the consciousness literature, it would sound like you're going to have to spend many, many lifetimes. Certainly as a yogi, you're going to have to spend many, many lifetimes before you can realize the truth of these statements. Well, this particular method so rapidly allows your consciousness to grow that you find out for yourself the truth of what's been said by the sages throughout the ages.
Have you had any, I'm just going back to when you were co-authoring a textbook on orthomolecular psychiatry with Linus Pauling. Have you had any recent contact with Dr. Pauling?
I haven't, no. Our travels have been in different circles of the last few years.
I'm struck by where you have gone and where he has gone. I mean, he of course still being actively involved in the whole area.
He goes deeper and deeper into what he's into. Yeah. And I tend to keep moving on. And when I see a thing is launched on its own and many people have come into the field and it has all the momentum it needs to thrive, it no longer needs my energy. And I myself, as I evolve, keep moving along. And my search for what would be helpful to others has actually led me into these experiences myself. I've always tried them myself first. As far as my relationship with my colleagues, like anybody in the consciousness movement, the people that you were involved with think you're going crazy. Having a nervous breakdown, they wonder about you, they think you're drifting off, they think you're freaking out. You know what I mean? Yes. You give up, very lucrative careers, and you give up power, and you give up prestige, and board memberships, and president of this, president of that, and worldly success. And you found something more important, they don't understand it. Of course, the other thing upsetting is they can't control you anymore, you see, because they're into their ego games. And they can't understand why prestige doesn't interest you anymore, why power doesn't interest you. All these little carrots, they hang out and you don't bite at them, and they figure you've got to be crazy. It's just that you found something far more satisfying, something far more powerful, something which ultimately is far more helpful to mankind. The reason I'm here today is because I just want people to know that there's something powerfully effective, ultra simple, that can relieve suffering on every level, physical, mental, spiritual. Allow one to achieve your physical goals, your goals in the world, your goals in relationships, and your spiritual goals. See, in the evolution of consciousness, we go through three major stages, which has been well described throughout the ages. First we're into havingness, then we're into doingness, and ultimately and finally into beingness. So when we're coming from lack, what we're motivated by is the desire to have. And those motivations of desire, lust, fear, grief, anger, and all become very activated. Once you have gotten your energy up and your consciousness up so that you can have, now having is not really your problem. Once you reach sort of like middle-class respectability, you realize you can have. You got 2 cars in the garage, the kids are going to college. Having is no longer a thrill. Everybody's got a Cadillac in your neighborhood. Big deal. So now what do you get into? Now you go into doing. Once you've achieved havingness, doingness is what's important. So now you're on the board of this and the board of that, and you're running the PTA meetings, and you're the chairman of this, and you're the president of the company, you're head of the committee, you're into beautifying your environment, keep San Francisco beautiful, and you're into improving the world and doing this. And then as you see what your doingness is all about, and you see what doing this, where it really comes from, what it's achieving, and you see what your role in it has been, doing this no longer is where you're at, and you come into the experience of your own being. And with this method, you rather rapidly come into the experience of your own perfection. You begin to experience your beingness. The content of what's going through your consciousness is no longer important. What runs through the water is no longer important, it's the water, you realize, you see. It's not the goldfish, but the water that the goldfish is going through. So now what fish is running through the tank is relatively important because you realize that you're the water. So you're the all. You're it. You're what there is in the universe. On what's happening.
the laughter fill the room. David, before we had the music come in there, and I was listening to you, and it just occurred to me that it was sounding as if you've discovered with this method a way to circumvent or short-circuit all of the great religious traditions of humanity's history, that here's a way to literally reach enlightenment, as it were, or discover who you are without having to adopt a particular philosophy or tradition.
That's true. The reason being that what you study is a spiritual study were truths discovered by someone else. When you accept hearsay evidence without knowing it through your own experience, then it's a program. It's a program when it's not a realization, an unfoldment of your own. And in other words, what happened to some historical figure 2,000 years ago is absolutely fascinating. It doesn't help you one iota. It's when the same experience unfolds in you, and then you see what that person was saying to you. What the person was saying to you is that just as it happened within me, it can happen in you, and you will discover the same things about yourself that I found. So this method allowed me to find out that that is so. The reason I have not been studying any spiritual things and consciousness things is I really don't want to contaminate myself with more programs to be released.
How would you relate it to your experience with Buddhism?
Well, let's take it, how do you realize the truth of any spiritual truth? When you think of it, what are the various techniques possible? You can meditate on it, you can contemplate it, you can repeat it as an affirmation, you can chant it to yourself as a mantra. It's as though you're desperately trying to convince yourself of the truth of something you don't know. If we remove the barriers between yourself and truth, then the truth dawns upon you. And the truth just is, it just is. And nothing need be said about it. So that, let's take the laws of manifestation. As you keep releasing, and you're letting go of all these programs and limitations, what happens is if you think a thing, it comes into manifestation, and as you go on with the releasing method, it comes into manifestation almost instantly. You don't need to read anything about the laws of manifestation, because what's happening is that all your needs are automatically fulfilled as you flow through the day. Everything is effortless. Everywhere you need to go, a car pulls up and takes you. And the thought of food instantly produces food, and you don't need to read anything about the laws of manifestation, because manifestation is what's happening, and it just becomes obvious. And after a while, you notice that you'd rather be careful of what you think. I know one day in Sedona, I said to my friend Randy, I said, "Be nice if we had a cat around here." Well, that one thought was sufficient. Everybody and his brother for the next 2 weeks offered us cats. We had litters of cats. We'd go to the supermarket. The clerk would say, "Hey, we're home for a cat." And I said, "We better cancel cat," because just the one thought, the energy, you see. So you discover the laws, the spiritual laws of the universe by yourself. All by yourself, you discover them. You discover that what you begin thinking about, what you give energy to, is what comes into your life. And these are ancient laws, written by all the great sages, but you discover them for yourself.
So you don't have to practice zazen anymore?
No. Those are methods of quieting the mind. And as you release, the mind becomes automatically quiet. You don't need artificial means. I've gone all through mantras and meditations and swinging and singing and jumping, and I've done them all. And they're artificial means. These are artificial means to quiet the mind. They're artificial. To chant to yourself one sentence over and over to try and get yourself into an almost hypnotic state of mental quietude is an artificial state. And the minute you get off, the minute you uncross your legs and stand up and go back into the world, the chaos starts in your head again. So it's unnatural and it doesn't work. I want my mind to be silent because there's nothing pressing, nothing I have to get, because I'm not coming from lack. I have it all. So there's no need to go out into the world to get what is already mine. So I'm released from it. In other words, one day I was teaching a class of miracles, and a student came up to me and said, hey, how come you still wear glasses? And I said to myself, good question. How come I still need to wear glasses? Here I am, a perfect being with all power at my disposal, and I just never thought of it. So I said, gee, that's a good question. So I took them off. I've never put them back on since. Well, I wore glasses for 40 years because of myopia and astigmatism. And for the first 6 weeks I went through, I was sort of like Mr. Magoo. And actually my internal spiritual guidance is what the program I had going then is I see what I need to see when I need to see it. So I often got close to the cliff, which is I got close to the cliff, I saw the cliff for about 6 weeks. Then after 6 weeks the fear went away. And all of a sudden I noticed I could read perfectly. And I could see anything I needed to see. And now my vision is perfect. This is 40 years of myopia and 40 years of astigmatism. So I don't need to do any eye exercises. I don't have to chant affirmations to myself, oh, I have perfect eyes, and let go wanting to have bad eyes, and looking for what is the payoff of having bad eyes, and going through all these circumlocutions. All I have to do is let go of the limitation and experience the perfection of my own being. A perfect being, then, having such power, the body follows instantly, and, within a certain period of time. And it follows suit. So the body will obey what the mind believes. And as you see your perfection and affirm it, then the body automatically responds. All these diseases and deformities and limitations fall away.
Bob, is this what happens in the Course itself, that people have the experience that David is so eloquently describing for himself?
Well, it usually takes more than one or two releases. But it depends, of course, where people come into the Course from. A couple of courses ago, the man I mentioned who'd run the marathon and had pain in his heel kept releasing throughout the Course and kept releasing on whatever feelings came up by himself as we were in class. And at the end of it, he said to the class that, I have been releasing. I could just see the expression on his face getting lighter and lighter and lighter. He said, I have released my fear of death. Well, for most people, that's a very big one. And everyone in the Course reaches a state of calmness, of peacefulness, of tranquility, of caring not so much about those things that they cared about before, what people would think about them, how they're going to do what they're going to do, having to push and rush in order to get things done. So a lot of people, they reach the state of knowing that there is a peacefulness that they can attain their own way. Whether they go all the way or not is pretty much up to them. But they can do it with time, and they feel better and better and better.
Well, I can go out to Bodega Bay and spend a few days and watch the dawns and watch the sunsets and have that same feeling of peacefulness, and I find that a lot of my concerns drop away, and a lot of the things that I attach myself to as being important aren't nearly so important anymore. What's the difference between what you're talking about and that experience that is available to many people? And it may be a Bodega Bay, it may be a High Sierra mountain backpack, it may be any number of things.
You'd like to have that Himalayan feeling on 42nd and Broadway, right? I'll never forget the first time I had it on 42nd and Broadway. I'd been in a little cottage in the woods, and I was in such a state of profound peace, and I sort of avoided going to the city. And then finally it came up that I had to go to the city. And I'll never forget that night. I went into New York City, and I said, this city has changed. Something incredible has happened here. It's like a blanket of peace. Underneath the hubbub of the city, which is on the surface, underneath it was an enormous peace and a power holding it all together. And I felt the love that was holding this city together. Without the powerful love emanating from more evolved people, the city would absolutely destroy itself, because the amount of negativity there is staggering. And yet I felt a tremendous peace and calmness that never left me. And it was funny, I remember I was walking down Fifth Avenue, and this old, what the world would call a bum, was walking down the street. And I looked at the bum, and instantly we recognized each other. And I recognized that he was one of the ones from whom this enormous, powerful peace was emanating to the city. This is a man who no longer needed anything from the world. He didn't need a thing from this world. You see? When we first learned the method, as Bob was saying, we go after, our goals keep changing and they get higher and higher. When we still want things in the world, we go into the world and we get them. Now that we've released all the things between ourselves and getting those things, they come into our life rather easily. And then we find that that doesn't bring us happiness, and so we say, well, what else is there? And that's how we go from having this to doing this, and ultimately into being this.
So in a very
be is sufficient.
In a very real sense, your 20 years of practicing Buddhism was a very important element in the level of realization or understanding that you've reached through this method.
It was frustrating, see, because it's slow as compared to this method. So a realization that it took enormous time and effort with other slower techniques, yoga techniques, I mean, I've tried them all, where this method just spontaneously comes into your experience in a relatively short time. Really, I mean, it's a rather short time. In a few years, one's consciousness can advance enormously. As I said, you know, the difference in the amount of fear I was holding. For instance, I wouldn't get within a half a mile of the Grand Canyon. You'd have to strap me to a stretcher to get me to the edge. And I think I'd go unconscious with terror. I mean, I really was terrified of heights. And I can literally sit on the edge and look down. So that enormous fear, you know, I always look at that as sort of a getting the tighter of the quantity of one's fear that you're holding. That amount of fear just has disappeared. Any technique that can do that in such a short time is a very powerful technique. You know, I've done psychoanalysis, I've been in psychoanalysis, and after 4 years of psychoanalysis I can look back and see what I let go of. And frankly, I can let go of that much in a day, less than a day. Releasing technique is so fast and so powerful.
So people should be flocking to this from all over, it would seem to me.
Well, frankly, we didn't want the public to know about it before because there weren't enough teachers to teach the method.
How many teachers are there?
Now there's enough teachers, I think, to handle.
We have 6 teachers. I'm teaching the course on the West Coast. On the East Coast, there are 5, and there are more in training. So we've got teachers.
Uh-huh.
In the book, there's a book coming out called The Book of the Method. We'll explain the method, and actually we'll take the reader through quite a few releases. And anybody can begin to experience what it's like if you can look at a feeling you're having right now and ask yourself, could you let go wanting to change that feeling? And this brings you very close to how the method works. That it's simply a letting go-ness, a willingness to let things flow and let them go. And of course fear comes up because we have the idea if we don't control things out there, you know, the disaster will strike. And then we discover that it's exactly the opposite, that our attempt to handle these things out here is exactly what's preventing the, you know, perfect solution from flowing in on us. And we discover, you know, all the truth of the Taoism. We discover all the truth the Buddha ever spoke. All the truth ever spoken by mankind become your own inner experience and unfoldment. And now they're truly yours because, you know, it's not hearsay. That, you know, what happened to somebody else in some other time and age. It's your experience here and now.
My guests are David Hawkins and Robert Scott, and we're talking about the Sedona method, a way of releasing yourself into, sounds to me like total happiness and fulfillment and joy. I'm wondering, again, it occurs to me that since now you've trained a group of teachers and more teachers are being trained, books coming out, sounds to me like you're gearing up to take over the world with this method. Is that what's happening?
I don't think so.
The course, when it first started out, was really, there were a few people around Lester, and I think David mentioned earlier that people wanted to make a guru of him, and the way the course has developed has really been a reflection of that first attitude that Lester had, that we really don't want to become a mass movement. That's not the idea. but we'd like to make it available for anyone. And David's talked a good bit about the very outer reaches, but I'd kind of like to bring it back to the very practical things that people can get from the Course, because we teach it to people who are ordinary people, as well as to people who are psychics, actors, writers, painters, what have you. And the Course is designed in the way that everyone gets what he or she wants from it, the way they want to do it. So recently I had a course in which a grandmother, a lady 72 years old, and her granddaughter, 15, were both sitting next to each other for the whole 4 days. The girl just felt more and more comfortable as she was able to release her feelings of resentment towards her parents and sister, feelings of disappointment. Her sister had gone off to college and this girl missed her. And she just felt better and easier about the whole thing. Her grandmother was living with her husband, who just retired, and that was a source of friction. Frequently, I think the most dramatic effects of using the method occur in relationships, where people used to a relationship of conflict. I'll pick at him, then if he picks back, I'll pick harder, or I'll make a little remark, and if she if she rises to the bait, I'll give her the old silent treatment, or I'll let her have it. When people stop doing it, when they release their feelings of wanting to be liked or wanting to get attention through being ornery or bothering another person, the relationship becomes peaceful immediately. And we've had people take the Course, husband and wife, who always had a stormy time. Soon after they do it, boy, things are easy, they enjoy being with each other, everything's easy, calm. And
what about those people who may seemingly have it together pretty well? Do they get benefit from going through it?
Well, we taught the Course in the corporate structure, in New York primarily, but can do it here. These are people who are successful in business. We teach them a way to do it more easily, to get their work done faster. An architect in San Francisco, as a matter of fact, recently took the Course and found that he was able to do his work in a quarter the time. He was more creative, he could do it faster. His mind wasn't cluttered up by feelings that interfered with his ability to create, to see the problem and do something about it. So it's an action course where we're concentrating on getting rid of those feelings that keep us stuck, inactive, not doing what we really want. So for active people, it enables them to make decisions quickly, to take the course that's appropriate, to see clearly, using their discrimination, what needs to be done and the best way to do it, what's a waste of time, so that they go straight to the point, get it done.
There are many people that go around thinking they're not stuck. Does it take a recognition that one that has some stuck feelings to really get benefit from the Course?
It takes a desire, yes. The want to is the thing, obviously, that motivates people. If someone is completely comfortable, happy with the way they are, why would they want to do anything else? If you see that you may have reached a comfortable point, and a lot of people who are successful have. They've done a lot. They've achieved what they want. They feel fairly satisfied, but there's still something missing. That feeling of something missing is the motivating point. And then they'd like to get the whole, go for the whole, go for everything.
I'm wondering if this is a technique or a method that allows one to avoid having to go through what most of us have to go through, which is our total life experience, to come to a recognition or a realization that it isn't all that it was cut out to be, and somehow we missed one of the links along the way that allowed us to find out what it was all about. Is this a way, like if you're 18, to avoid the pitfalls of the 20s or the 30s, the 40s, etc.?
I'd say, just from my own experience of teaching the course, that it isn't. It's not a substitute. Everyone comes into the course as we are in our lives with very different point of view, different problems, different desires, and to each is given according to his need. How some people, that this is not a cure for adolescence or for middle age. It's not possible to do that. However, as people with the problems associated with those times release them, they can sail through them with an ease that you wouldn't believe. So I think that you can't, sometimes people want a shortcut, and I don't think people should have the impression that you can shortcut the whole system. We need to take the mass of accumulated negative feelings that we've built up over the years and release them. We cannot pretend we don't have them and jump off them. That's the reason that a lot of people who meditate or are concerned with spiritual paths find themselves stuck. And you mentioned the word stuckness, I think, appropriately. What's sticking them? Well, it's the stuff that's still there that they have tried to get up above, but is still holding them back. Feelings, you can be very interested in spiritual techniques, spiritual paths in that direction, but if you're annoyed at your landlady because she hasn't heated your apartment enough, that's going to keep you stuck there, no matter how well you do anything else.
Do you find, the two of you find that you still have sticky places come up in your life?
Oh, sure, from time to time. Yeah.
David, how about you?
Not anymore, but I certainly went through an awful lot of garbage. I went through an awful lot of garbage. To get to the space that I'm at the moment. But it isn't that it could be avoided. In fact, the beauty of it is you no longer have to avoid feelings because you don't have to be afraid of feelings. I was afraid of feelings for many years because there didn't seem to be any effective way to handle it. In other words, if you really let up into your feelingness, how angry you really were at somebody, you would just have a terrible Sunday afternoon, just walking around with these angry thoughts and feelings. And I found mechanical ways of getting rid of it. You know, I'd go out and polish the car, and I found that got rid of anger, for instance. But I was afraid of feelings because there was no method, to handle them. If you let all that anger up, what are you going to do with it? If you express it, goodbye relationship. And if you suppress it, it reactivates your ulcer. So I was afraid of feelings because really I was at the mercy of them. See, I was at the effect of the feelings. Now I had a method that I could disconnect the feelings, as they came up. Now I'm no longer afraid of feelings. Tell me anything. Hit me with anything. Put me in any situation. Drop me in the desert. It doesn't make any difference because whatever the feeling is, I can handle it as it comes up. Because I'm not afraid of feelings, I'm not afraid of any situation. There's no place I won't go. There's nobody I won't see. There's nobody I won't be with. There's practically no experience that I would say no to. Because whatever it brings up in me, I can handle. You're really, at the master switch, you might say now. Now you see how simple the whole thing is. All these suppressed feelings over the lifetimes, all with the same basic motive, security of the body. That's really what it all amounts to, and all the implications thereof. And as you let them go, you find that there is something else that accomplishes the same things effortlessly.
Have you found security, David?
I have total security each and every moment. And everything I need is supplied as I need it. There's absolutely nothing I need. I have it all. There's absolutely nothing I'm without. So, if a thought comes through my mind, it comes in. One day, we were talking about, should we tell, how can we get just the knowledge that there is such a method available to people? And it crossed my mind. I thought, well, New Dimensions would be a great place to talk. All it took was the thought that it would be a great place. These are the kind of people, this kind of an audience is interested in this kind of thing. Something simple, effective. They've heard all the complicated programs and all. People that are able to hear truth. Sure, you know, what is simple, obvious, and effective is very obscure to the average person, but I feel that listeners such as you get on your program are able to hear this kind of thing and put it to good use. They're like I am. You hear it, you try it, you find out if it works. If it works, you turn others onto it. If it doesn't, you say, well, it's something else I tried.
David, I want to thank you for giving us that thought and for being with us here on the radio. And Bob, thank you. I've been speaking with Dr. Robert Scott, teacher of the Sedona Method, and Dr. David Hawkins, someone who has obviously experienced the benefits of the Sedona Method.